All right, folks. Thanks for coming together, and welcome to September. Hope everybody had a great summer. As always, thank you to Dr. Vogel for being the official cookie supplier of the REMAC. Got many thumbs up from around the room. Well done as always. Excellent. Do we have an approval of last minutes? Thank you, Dr. Doynow. Second. All in favor? Thank you. All right. Quick correspondence. We have a new controlled substance agent from Clifton Park. There was an investigation we got notes on from our friends at the Department of Health. I'm not going to read those in the record. The notes of investigations that do not pertain to the region are available here if anybody would like to read it. Where is... everything here except... there's no. Carol is our representative from Mohawk. Would you like to introduce the medical director quickly?
I think pretty prominent, Dr. Heidi Cordy.
Gotcha. This is a request for Dr. Cordy to serve as medical director for Mohawk Ambulance. Dr. Cordy has previously been introduced to this group at length, and we have a CD on file for her. She has a rather extensive background in EMS and is now working successfully with Mohawk on our behalf, and this is just confirmation. Everybody in the room, we can just have a quick motion to approve. Dr. Rathert, who is suspect in his motion to approve because he's going off the hook. A second.
You got booted for the beard.
Dr. DeMace, all in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. We have a letter from Dr. McHugh announcing his intention to run for REMAC chair or vice chair.
Petition is accepted.
Which is in in our correspondence as well. It's the only reason it's being introduced here. Just as a by the way, originally our discussion was that there was going to be elections at this meeting for chair, vice chair, and systems EMS medical director. On further review, because we have had some people looking at the bylaws very carefully, it was found that if we were to indeed have those elections today, we would be in violation of our bylaws. So the elections will take place at the last month of the year unless further changes are done when we review the bylaws later. There are several disciplinary hearings, as I said, that are over. Dr. Doynow, would you like to briefly take us through academic?
Sure. So there was a lengthy discussion about wait times in emergency departments and thoughts on how to improve that. Dean's going to take data over the next 2 months. So anybody here who has in any agency, make sure that data is filled out in your PCR. And we'll try and break it down and see if there's a particular time of day, particular hospital time of day, where this is a problem, and we'll work on how to hopefully improve it. Albany Memorial was represented by Sam and Dorothy, and just for everybody's information, Albany Memorial ED is not closing, and they're very happy to have patients come to them within the limitations of what they can do at Albany Memorial. There is actually a sheet around someplace that has all the specifics of it over there. It's on the table if anybody wants to look at it as to what they can and cannot accept, but pretty much what they've been accepting all along. St. Mary's will be closing to an urgent care, and that exact date, I think, was, you remember, Sam?
December 20th-ish? I don't know, but it's definitely this fall.
So
It's definitely before the year's over.
And that was basically it.
Gotcha. Just for the record, the discussion with Memorial, in particular from St. Peter's Health Partners, was fantastic, and it showed really the collaboration that's going on in the region to make sure that patients are getting the care that they need when they need it. It was a really nice discussion. Good having Dorothy here. Sam.
Just to further clarify what Don had mentioned, the strategy from St. Peter's Health Partners relative to Troy has not changed at all. So that's why the whole thing with St. Mary's is moving forward just as planned. However, the strategy with Albany Memorial did change, which is one of the reasons why St. Peter's had requested the audience today at the meeting. And in a nutshell, the inpatient med surg and the ED will continue to function at that location, and they can accept all adult medical patients that are not critically ill. Right. Correct. No peds, no OBGYN, no trauma, but adult medical patients that are not critically ill, which is basically what they have been able to accept.
Moving on surgical capabilities?
Yes,
Okay, so you have differentiated billing page, this still go.
they can go there.
Sorry, Rob, what was that?
Surgical capabilities, so they can,
Adult surgery,
Yeah.
yes.
That's just, I can only think from what we're seeing in terms of total volume at the tertiary care centers in the city of Albany, and it's exciting news that Memorial is gonna remain. Really exciting news. Anybody else, comments from academic? The only other thing from academic I think that will bear further review is the idea of alternative destinations and what else we can do within regulatory change to better use the resources of the system. There were a couple of people that really were speaking pretty vigorously on that, and I think those are things that we just need to continue to focus on.
And see if we can do anything when we talk to DOH.
Exactly.
I think relative to that issue, unfortunately, this can become a political issue without getting into the politics of it. So I think the whole discussion should be patient-focused and what's the best for the community, what's best for EMS services, and what's best for emergency services and healthcare in the community. And I think the focus needs to stay exactly on that. You do not want to get off on a tangent relative to the political agenda, relative to people without, I'm not even going to say anything else. I just think the political agenda is out there, and that's what you're fighting against from a regulatory perspective.
Yeah, I think we really need to do is hold true to Bruce's words, right? That no matter what we do,
Exactly.
it needs to go back for our patients.
Exactly. Yep.
Nice. REMSCO, no recent meeting. CMAC and SEMSCO Adventures will be coming up at the end of this month. For those of you who have nothing to do on the 25th and 26th? 26th and 27th. 26th, 27th? Bring popcorn and come on over. They'll be at the meetings in Troy. QI will be meeting next month?
next one.
Okay. And no report from the Hawks. Nurses Committee met yesterday, and Amory Cross had the meeting yesterday at Albany Med. St. Peter's was represented, Memorial by telephone. Not always very good telephone connection, but we tried. And a significant amount of AMC nursing support, which was really great. And really the things that we talked about, first was equipment left at hospitals, and getting that equipment to be removed by EMS. So the more you can encourage your providers to not leave any equipment at the hospital, that would be great. The amount of expensive equipment that gets left at Albany Med specifically, without any labels on it, so we can identify who it goes back to, and just getting destroyed by sitting on top of other expensive equipment is kind of ridiculous. I threw out 3 broken Sagers the other day. What's the Sager go for now? You know? A couple $100. So, you know, they should have been should have left with the crew if possible, unless the patient drastically needed it, in which case please come back to get it. Backboards, unless the patient is deposited in A1 or A2 as a level 1 trauma, there is no reason that a backboard should ever be left at the hospital. It should always, the patient should be log rolled off that backboard, taken out of there if the patient remains on a backboard.
I don't see helicopters taking other people's backboards with backboards.
Then you gotta come get them. They make really nice picnic benches,
Sleds too,
just saying. What?
Yeah.
What else?
Sleds.
sleds.
Oh, very good sled. Not in the summer though. Not in the summer. PCRs and worksheets, complaint will never change, and I'm sure Sean in the back will echo this. Please make sure the documentation is done, the documentation gets to the right place. We recognize that the hospitals are complicit in this, and very frequently we lose documentation, but please encourage folks to get them where they're going. The Nurses Committee is continuing to work on a project involving both slide sheets and hover mats. You guys had the entertainment of watching me get dragged around the floor on a hover mat the other day at our last meeting. It did not make it into the agenda, which is good. But they work, and they work really well. If we can ultimately preserve our staff, both in the hospital and outside of the hospital, from back injuries, that would be absolutely huge. So some folks from Albany Med are working on figuring out how best to use the lessons that have already been learned in the St. Peter's system as well as in the Saratoga system to move this agenda forward and then bring it back first to the council and then to here for endorsement and hopefully a business plan. And the last is restock. There was some question over whether or not medications were being restocked correctly. I think that some of the hospitals in the system are not restocking the 10-in-1 dexamethasone, which becomes a problem. I just confirmed today that the Med is indeed doing the 10-in-1, which means it's available out there. Everybody should be restocking it. If there's a problem with hospitals not having it, either pass it back to the REMAC rep who's here, or just bring it to Tim and he can get in touch with individual hospitals so we can make sure that the medications are being restocked appropriately. First agency upgrades, BLS albuterol, epi, glucometer, Narcan, Narcan for Helderberg, glucometers for Pittstown, albuterol for Pittstown, and an ALS upgrade, which I think was worthy of some discussion. I see Mr. Kroll in the back. Steve, do you and Brian want to speak to the Delmar Bethlehem proposed paramedic upgrade?
Sure.
Did everybody have a chance to read the handouts that we sent out by electronically this morning? I'm sorry that we didn't get to do this earlier, but Steve and Brian are here, and Bruce can speak to this briefly.
Good afternoon, Steve Kroll. I'm the Chief of Delmar Bethlehem EMS. We're asking to be upgraded to the paramedic level today. It's being done in combination with our partnership with the Albany County Sheriff's Office, represented by Brian Wood. Our medical directors are both here. Bruce is co-medical director of Delmar Bethlehem EMS, Dr. Doynow, medical director for the Sheriff's Office. Our two agencies have essentially operated in partnership for many years, which each call having a BLS or AEMT level crew from Delmar Bethlehem EMS and a paramedic level crew from the County Sheriff's Office. So we offer on all calls 24/7 ALS paramedic level service. However, we are looking to take a step forward with our integration in, even though one ambulance rolls to every call, whether it's accrued by the combination of our two agencies, 2 PCRs get done. And it's a tremendous strain of resources to be doing 2 sets of patient documentation for every call. And in our quality improvement process, we started sitting down and looking at those PCRs and realizing that you could start reading those PCRs and having one crew go back to this station and do the PCR, having the other half of the crew go back to do different PCR. They didn't always look like the same patient. The crews, so we're moving forward. We both use ePCR system, and we would like to have a 1 PCR system. And the route to do that is going to be upgrading Delmar Bethlehem EMS back to a paramedic level agency. Our contract, we contract the Sheriff's Department to provide all the ALS services. So there's a long checklist of things that a paramedic level service needs to do. We already receive them from the Albany County Sheriff's Office. That relationship wouldn't change. But for us, and we would do 1 chart per call, and we would integrate our crews. So rather than the EMT going this way to do his chart, the paramedic going that way to do his or her chart, they would be working together on a chart. We think it's going to improve patient care. It's going to improve the training of our crews, improve the integration of our crews with true integration of the paramedic and EMT working together, better documentation. But the route we have to take is for ALS charts to reside in a BLS/AEMT agency's database doesn't work. But if we're upgraded to, we'll call it a virtual paramedic status, with the paramedic service being provided by the Sheriff's Office, we will do 1 PCR, And we've been working with the vendor. That PCR will then shoot into two systems. It will fill all the requirements of the state and of the region and of the agencies and of the hospitals of having appropriate documentation. So that we're applying for an upgrade for that purpose. And I think the application was complete. And Tim, I think, forwarded it this morning. And I'm glad to answer any questions when it's discussed. And Brian, I don't know if you want to add to it.
This is what I brought to the REMAC back in November of 2016 to try to do. I looked at this a ton of different ways. I got the state involved. Basically, we were trying to eliminate the generation of two charts, and a lot of our calls, and probably 70% of them, because they happen during the daytime shift. We have a BLS provider and a paramedic on the ambulance running an ALS crew, and because the sheriff's department is the ALS provider, we have to go back and do our chart, and then because of the billing purposes and Delmar's of their agency, they have to go back and do a BLS chart. That's logistically a headache for us, but then beyond that, when we run where there are two separate crews, where the care could be done by the paramedic and then the BLS provider, same patient, and I brought and put up here for everybody to look at. We had two patients that if you read the charts, you would think they were completely two different people. Two different complaints, two different durations, two different vital signs. So those are some of the challenges. I went every way I could think of. I worked for hours with EMS charts to come up with a way to do it so that we could write one chart, and when we closed it, it went to Delmar Bethlehem and to Albany County. The challenge there was it would go off with the same unit number, and that would screw up the state statistics when I went to the state. I talked to the state. It wasn't really doable unless Delmar was a paramedic level agency. This really seems like to be the cleanest way for us to do it. It's done with the with the contract with us, so in order for them to maintain that status, they have to have a constant contract with us to provide a paramedic. So there'll always be a paramedic on that ambulance when we're doing those types of calls. And I just think clinically, it doesn't change the care we're providing, but in the overall part of it, the quality of care, and when you're looking at these charts, I mean, we close a chart, they both go to the emergency department, the docs, nurses, everything. If you're looking at those charts and be like, well, which one do I even believe? There could be some changes. So I think it helps us operationally as we continue to work closer and partner with Delmar Bethlehem, but it helps us, in the long term by making sure that our patient documentation is accurate and completed. So.
I just want to throw out one clinical corollary of what I hope ends up happening that I've been espousing for years, is that there really is no such thing as an ALS call or a BLS call anymore. That was back in the 70s and in the 80s. At this point now, a twisted ankle is not an ALS or BLS call, because if that twisted ankle, which used to be BLS, gets morphine, it's now an ALS call. The patient still gets a full assessment looking for all those other injuries. It just happened to be lucky that all they have is the twisted ankle. So by doing this process, we are now going to become more unified. And on scene, there's not going to be the BLS guys leaning against the wall as much and the ALS person providing care. But I think you're going to see more cohesiveness and more team because we are one. And I think that's what this is going to migrate to clinically, not just on paper.
So what happens with billing now?
We do all the billing anyways.
So it'll be one bill,
We have a joint services agreement with them, so they bill for the ALS services.
and you guys, under your contract, would be reimbursed? Yeah, okay.
Actually, it doesn't even, money doesn't come to us, it goes right to the town. So the money they
Yeah.
send to the town for their BLS agreement, they send the ALS money along with it.
Yeah.
Can I ask two questions? Actually, one Rich has to answer. Delmar Bethlehem operates a Town of Bethlehem's ambulance certificate. Do they also have to upgrade?
I'm sorry, one more time, Mary?
To throw more into the
Right.
vegetable soup mix, Delmar Bethlehem, Steve operates the Town of Bethlehem's OpCert. Correct, Steve?
We have a dual set of CON. We
Correct.
have both OpCert. So
Yeah,
right
both
now,
operate this.
right now, we're starting with Delmar Bethlehem EMS. We operate and bill as Delmar Bethlehem EMS. Delmar Volunteer Ambulance Service.
Correct, but I'm wondering if, because they operate for them, if they also have to upgrade at the same time. I'm not trying to muddy the waters, I'm just.
No, that's okay. Joe Farrell and I go around the circle of this all the time. We are operating as Delmar Volunteer Ambulance Service. We are billing as Delmar Volunteer Ambulance Service. The bus transports the patient, has a certificate from Delmar Volunteer Ambulance Service. We have a CON for the operating territory. We have we have a contract with the Albany County Sheriff's Office to provide ALS. As a sidecar trailer, if the town of Bethlehem can do this, but doesn't have to do this, it doesn't affect our operation. On any given day, we have dual operating certificates on that ambulance, and you only have to have one. If that answers the question.
Are you billing under, and this is, I'm way outside of,
Yeah, we're billing as Delmar Volunteer Ambulance
using that
Service.
provider ID with CMS?
Correct.
Okay. Second thing is, do you guys have a virtual 3C agreement, narcotics licensing built into your verbiage for the contract?
It's all provided by the Sheriff's Office. We
But
don't
you
have
specifically
anything.
need to mention that,
Any amendments to the contract that are necessary to close the process.
I'm making this easier on you, because otherwise you'd have to apply for one.
Okay, well, we'll get the specific verbiage and make sure that it's in place. Not a problem.
So essentially, it's just that Delmar Bethlehem or Delmar Volunteer Ambulance Services is going back to the paramedic level and then subcontracting out for staffing.
Correct.
That's correct. That's
Which
what
is,
it's how-
which is what we already do. We already subcontract out for that exact stuff.
And it sounds like subcontracting out some of the operation stuff too, like the controlled substances.
Which again, we already do.
Right.
I mean, we do, you know, the entire ALS component is already provided by the Sheriff's Office, and the medical direction comes from the Sheriff's Office. But we're fortunate to have a very close relationship where Dr. Doynow is not only the county medical director, but he's also associate medical director of Delmar Bethlehem, so we've integrated our work together.
Any other questions for Steve? Or Brian or Bruce?
How's medical director work?
Terrible.
Yeah.
Well, you know, we haven't worked all the processes out of how we'll operate under a single chart, other than Dr. Doynow is responsible for the medical direction at the paramedic level. Dr. Ushkow is responsible for the medical direction at the BLS or AEMT level. But we have a long history of any call where there's a QI question. We are looking at two charts, and, you know, Brian on his side, and me on his side, and we meet in the middle, and we talk about what happened on this call. I think it becomes simpler, because now we're not pulling two separate charts and trying to figure out what happened. We're gonna have one chart, and, you know, as Bruce said, you know, it's not whether it's an ALS or BLS call, it's how it surrounds the patient. And we're gonna have two medical directors looking at us and saying, or as a proxy for the other, making decisions about how we handle a specific QI situation.
It works already. I mean, we've been doing this for a year. We just only on the BLS level, so when we do a BLS call with Delmar, we only can do one chart. The paramedics call it through, and we don't respond to the paramedic unit. So we're writing that chart at Delmar Bethlehem. My staff, shift commander, review the chart. I got other people that work for me that review charts and provide feedback. And those charts that become problematic are kicked to the medical director for his review. And, you know, so that's it.
Sam?
Just a point of information, I mean, it sounds to me like this is something that should go forward. The question is, should the motion include the contingency that there's an active, ongoing relationship?
That was supposed to be that way anyways when we, you know, that was.
When we talked about it before.
We talked about it before, was it had to be a continued ongoing relationship where it was, they resort back to your.
So I would make that motion.
That
To
sounds like
approve
an
as-
excellent idea. Sam, is there a second for Sam's motion? Thanks, Nick. I'd just like to say before we vote on this, that this is a fantastic model, and hopefully it can be emulated in more places. And the more we look at multiple charts, and some of us tend to look at multiple charts at the same time, it really is a bunch of blind people, you know, trying to explain an elephant. It just doesn't make sense to have that. Who knows, maybe someday we'll actually have emergency department patient charts, and we won't have nursing documentation and physician documentation. It'll just all be pertinent to the patient, one thing at a time. All in favor? Excellent, any opposed? Thank you, passes. Alrighty, that was really exciting, thank you. BLSFR upgrade for Quaker Street Volunteer Fire District. Okay. Public access defibrillation. Dean, I just want to check Pattersonville Fire and the Academy of the Holy Names. Both were returned incomplete. Did we give them instruction?
They came in without their collaborative agreement. So I sent it back with instructions that I need both.
Okay, did you also instruct them that they can put their AEDs in place and begin to have them there in case somebody needs help?
I did not
Someone's
officially do
replaced?
that.
Please make sure that that always happens with those.
But, so I have to either say it's complete or it's not complete.
Yep.
Like, so the state has like some, some muscle here. So in our review, it is either complete or it is incomplete. A conversation about where they are stored until they get that certificate and that letter back is a completely different.
Make sure to have that discussion with everybody. It would be absolutely terrible for us to have a cardiac arrest at either Pattersonville Fire or the Academy of the Holy Names before some bureaucratic paperwork is in place for something that is now publicly accessible. It should be publicly accessible as soon as they have them in their ownership. Let's take care of the bureaucratic stuff and make sure it doesn't impact lives, okay? All right. Next step. We're doing on too many different sides of this piece of paper, it's confusing. I think this may actually be the most pad applications that we've ever
No.
had on a shift. I don't remember 2 sheets before this.
Oh, yes.
But it's fantastic.
They go in cycles for updates.
Updates, just, I don't know that we need to know about them. New business. Dr. Rather, do you want to clarify MFI, RSI, your concerns with language and,
Yes.
and where we are with that?
A few months ago, I just happened to be doing some chart reviews, and I guess asked a very uninformed question of, I forget the exact case, but essentially there was a case where they were doing an MFI, or well, they were giving benzos to intubate a patient, but then couldn't get it, so then but there was only a single paramedic, but they had sucks available, they had a paralytic available, but they had to call a separate paramedic. And it really came to the question of like, why were they starting to try to intubate with the, and giving a medication with the intention to pass a tube through the cords and determining what an MFI was. Essentially, I thought that we would have one definition of what MFI was, what RSI was. It turns out that I guess some people say that if you just give benzos, you can do an intubation, not under the MFI rules. Some people say if you have either one. It's just very strange to me. And I feel that as a body, we need to actually have a unified definition of what's going on. In my opinion, if you need a medication in order to pass a tube, that's an MFI. And the reason that we use that medication is to get the highest success rate possible, which actually involves most of the time using a sedative and a paralytic to optimize your efforts. So why we would let people pick and choose how they're gonna define that seems problematic to me. And so I wanted to bring it up to this body just to see what others' thoughts were and to see if we can have a unified definition.
I think if they call it procedural sedation, which is what they're doing, if they didn't have a paramedic with them and therefore couldn't do MFI, they misquoted what they were doing, but they also need a command order for that. And all for the logic of, I understand that it was a new thing to bring up, let's do a baby step. If the first step works, then we don't need the second one. As far as we'll do the sedative, if that doesn't work, then we'll do the paralytic. But I think the airway science and EMS has progressed to the point where maybe we should just be calling it RSI and doing the whole thing. Would you let your residents sedate first and then see if they could get it and then try it?
No, absolutely.
Exactly.
I think that your optimization for first attempt success is what you're shooting for, and to use half of the tools is not appropriate. So you have the same risk to the patient, i.e. having a can't intubate, can't ventilate situation without the potential benefit of an optimized patient.
And then you're worse by the time you finally get it.
Absolutely.
Because now you're on your second time.
Especially after you wait for another crew member to satisfy the need.
And there is really the key. I mean, what it is, that's a holdover Band-Aid. I mean, back in the days when I actually had dark colored hair, you'd had hair maybe.
They have have TV back then?
That was, it was the poor man's way when there wasn't enough MFI around, people who were trained. And I think that just Band-Aid mentality has just sort of just been out there. We now have the ability to actually have crews, and I'm in total agreement that you just shouldn't start that sort of a process unless you have your second person there and you're ready to go. Because it is putting the patient at risk. But that's the history of that. That's where that came from.
Sure.
When there was only 3 people who were trained in MFI in the county.
And I believe we removed endotracheal innovation from the procedural sedation protocol for the last rollout.
No, it's there currently,
No, I'm looking at
unless
that.
they didn't update the app.
Where,
Don't forget, we can still talk to the doctor and say, and we can
Yeah.
talk to
And
any
it's
of them.
required
individually.
.4, it's not a,
yeah, it says you can only use
it's
this,
down in the key points.
this protocol may only be used for intubation of fundamental control.
It was a cartwatch.
Yeah, it was before,
Yeah.
so, yeah, okay.
Along with Dr. McHugh's statements, you know, and Rob will back me up on this also, but it's been this way for a long time. RSI, you know, we started and we called it MFI in this region because we were afraid to call it RSI. RSI is and has been a nationally approved part of paramedic education for years now. This is not a new thing anymore. It's honestly a standard of care. So we're not talking about our 1990s.
We've done a couple of these at the county, specifically coming out of Sahara County, where, because they don't do it, they get in, and it's probably we only see train wrecks because they're calling us because it's a train wreck. But these patients that they're giving benzos to and trying to get an airway, and then go to the doctor in a hurry. And then, you know, we basically jump on and try to do it. I mean, I haven't flown in a little while, but I can imagine that there were those patients as well in the medevac program, but, it is challenging, and I think that people are doing it because, you know, some of them it's a frustration thing where they've been working for an agency that's progressive with an MFI program, and then they get to another program that doesn't have it, so they're trying to do whatever they can for the patients, but other people, I think, would just, probably shouldn't be doing it, but, and it ends up just bad, and it's a shame that there's intubation is a lost art, and nobody's got to do it anymore, but,
Which one?
the option, either don't give them an airway or ruin it.
I think the other thing is, I find that a lot of folks are leaning towards benzos instead of etomidate. And they're supposed to carry etomidate whether they do RSI or not, at least that's a little bit better med to be.
Yeah, the mix is pretty much shifting to autonomy, ketamine versus Versed for
Right.
sedation. And Society for Critical Care guidelines are basically no benzos whatsoever.
Right,
Plus you're missing analgesia if you're just going anytime.
right.
Yeah, analgesia is now a modern part of the airway management. So anyway, making a long discussion, I think what action should we take? We're all in agreement, I think, that we shouldn't be doing the poor man, what used to be called the poor man's RSI. That has to go away.
Does this have to be brought to the collaborative as a suggestion?
Well, it's interesting. So when we first had the discussions at the collaborative level about where this would be, among the things that ended up hitting the cutting room floor was the requirement for 2 providers to perform an RSI. And the reason that hit the ground is because in the Hudson Valley, they've been doing RSI with a single provider for a while. I will never support that because I just don't think it's safe. The question is somebody more safe with BLS airway care or supraglottic airway care or single provider paralytics? Now, I can think of a bunch of paramedics that I would allow to paralyze me if I deserved it. On the other hand, I can think of some that I would prefer didn't, shall we say. And I think we can all think across folks that we know. That list may include doctors for some people. Who knows? But you know, that element has remained local. what the requirement is in order to push paralytics, which really is where the rubber meets the road in terms of this definition. But what an individual physician is gonna say when they're giving medical direction and someone's saying, I have this etomidate, I have this stroke patient, what should I do? Should I attempt to intubate this patient? That's probably our biggest question, rather than what we're gonna call it, what we're gonna suggest that people do, because we have a significant number of advanced life support agencies in this region that don't have access to paralytics. So, A, what do we call it? B, what do we tell our agencies? And where do we go?
Well, the one thing I'd also like to bring up is, remember these protocols were approved by CMAC and Sept. So if you're making a major change, you have to go back to the, you can't just change them.
We're not changing a protocol now. What we're doing here is discussing what we're gonna do from a medical direction perspective within the existing
As long as
protocols.
you're not deciding
Or
to
from a region.
change how you're approaching that particular, I mean, maybe I'm misunderstanding what you wanna do. If we're just changing what we're naming it, I guess that's not an issue.
But I think our concern is that what we're currently doing is substandard with the sedative, do an attempt with the inherent risks, and then do the paralytic. So I think we are looking at eventually changing the current protocol.
Yeah, I don't think that, see, I think there's the three different things, right? So there's, do we change the protocol, right? Which says, are optimized conditions met? Some people may say optimized conditions aren't met until that patient's paralyzed, in which case the paramedic has the ability to paralyze right off the rip now, right? And so I don't think there's a need to change the protocol, it's just a question of education. The second is, what do you do with those agencies that don't have paralytics? Do they need to carry them? Because we're changing, I completely disagree with Howard that carrying paralytics and having the ability to do RSI is not the standard of care. I think it is part of a scope of practice that is trained, but I don't believe in any way, shape, or form it's the standard of care. And third, what do you do when that person from that agency calls for medical direction and says, should I push 30 with etomidate and try? I don't know. I don't have the answer.
I mean, I'll just throw out there that I'm never a fan of, you know, when we have other airway adjuncts to do a sedation-only attempt. They're either down enough
Mm-hmm.
that you can, and especially with even BLS level CPAP now, right? You know, I mean, with CPAP, with, you know, other adjuncts, I don't think that we necessarily have to go straight to intubation. I don't think we have to take them deeper unless we're gonna actually do it right.
Overall in critical care, actually, the buzzwords are optimized before canalized. That applies both for endotracheal intubation and central line. Basically, the old race to put in a tube, race to put in a central line is gone. Now it's you want to optimize them first, you know, get their sats 100% for a while. Not 70, so therefore let's put in a tube. The question is how do we get this out?
Mm-hmm.
I think it's easy to talk to us, because we provide medical direction. So the first thing we need to do is talk to the docs, because the paramedics, hopefully, who are gonna be wanting to do that are gonna be calling us. And our answer needs to be uniform, to provide a good BLS airway.
I think it's pretty reasonable. I know the last couple of phone calls that I've gotten about, can I push a bunch of drugs and try to intubate this patient, have been patients who were on a throughway, about to pull off an exit into the city of Albany. But the answer was very clear. No. Please don't. Please don't. Manage the airway. Bring the patient. We'll take care of it in the light. Bruce, do you want to start putting together a draft of something? You can send it around to the group and then send it out to,
Just to the medical director,
Mhm.
the
Yeah.
will provide.
yeah,
I can write a letter saying.
yeah, the Remo doc.
Guys, not the way you put that on me.
No, because actually Dr. Rathert will help you.
It'll just be an educational letter about where critical care is going.
Just don't look for anything from Rathert for 2 weeks.
Right.
All right, awesome. Just to REMAC membership confirmation, just to confirm the current sitting members of the REMAC. Dr. Rathard for Albany Med, Rob McHugh from Ellis, Dr. Stepa from Memorial, Dr. DeMace from St. Peter's, Janicus from Memorial, Rob Donnarumma from Saratoga, Dr. Ushkow from Samaritan, and Dr. Miles, Dr. Hassett, Dr. Doynow, and Dr. Bosco are the sitting members of the REMAC. And we'll just needed to go through that because we're gonna go into bylaws in a minute. We've gone through Memorial. Where's Rich? Rich Ruther? Yeah, there he is, hiding in the middle. I wonder if I can see a Collegiate EMS initiative, please.
I just was told to,
Stand up.
oh, sorry. To let everybody know, SUNY, Skidmore, RPI, and I think Union and a few other surrounding universities that have EMS systems wanted to have a competition amongst themselves to see who was the best of the best, or whatever it was. So they've been having meetings. They've asked Remo and Dr. Daly to start forming some kind of collegiate Olympics for the EMS. So they'll have that sometime in the future with probably some kind of a CME component. So we may ask some physicians to come in and give a couple hours CME or something on a separate day or something. They really get into that. A lot of them want to be physicians, so it's something that they really want to promote. So if anybody has any ideas or any information they want to know more about it, let me know with Dr. Dale. It's not yet started yet, but it's in the process.
We did something like that a million years ago in Bethlehem at what is now Sept. Do you remember that, Bruce? There was some sort of competition there between all the EMS agencies locally. It wasn't the collegiate ones, but it was local EMS agencies, and MedFlight came and did some education. And we have like vague I mean, this is like when I was a resident.
You were driving the ambulances back then.
Yes, I was.
We won. Maybe just races to Chipotle or something like that. You never know. Whoever gets
It's right back to when Pete and had hair and Bruce was with Brown.
donut sauces, whatever.
So this is happening all over the place. There's a big competition. It's the New England states that do it. They usually hold it in Maine, then they go to Vermont, then they go into Massachusetts. And it's all the colleges that do EMS first response. And they compete, and it's huge groups of people that come out. And it's really good competition. And they in group with a lot of local EMS, a lot of physicians. And it's a weekend-long event. It's pretty amazing.
So something, it may not be that long, but they want to mirror it maybe a day or so, like what happens nationally, because they do go away for those competitions as well.
I don't know if they've looked at it or not, but I've served as liaison for a couple of different collegiate agencies, but National Collegiate EMS Foundation, they're, you know.
Yeah, they go to those. They want to have their own now.
Yeah, I was gonna say, it's got a good model though, and it's all free stuff you can grab from.
Yeah.
A lot of times, or oftentimes, a lot of our collegiate EMS agencies in the region are often overlooked. They're not really tied into a lot what's going on EMS-wise with Western providers. So we've been looking at ways where we can incorporate or have these folks interact with each other too. Bring them all together, share ideas, meet each other from various squads and stuff. Give them a way to interact and just have fun and maybe in a learning environment. So that's kind of what we're trying to do with this initiative.
One of the neat things that we're looking at is possibly renting a 5-bedroom apartment over the summer and having students who want to stay and work for the summer. You have them for 4 solid 2 to 4 years, but a lot of them can't afford housing over the summer. You want to keep them working for you, provide housing, they'll be there for the summer.
We had a lot of live-in student programs. They either live in the fire station or into we had an apartment outside behind one of our EMS buildings that the students lived in. It's a good program.
Cool. Thank you. Traction splints. Reason I brought traction splints in, I started thinking about these again while I was throwing out the broken ones in our EMS bed. The hair traction splint was fantastic technology.
50 years ago.
About 50 years ago. I would just like to put it to this group to encourage your agencies that if they're going out and buying splints and buying traction splints, please buy something that won't torque the lumbar spine, allows them to be put on much more easily, and preferentially can be used on 2 legs if possible. Sagers, KTDs, there are a couple of other devices like the Schlissman traction splint. Take a look at the links that we sent out. Encourage your agencies to buy those rather than hairs, just to make sure that we're heading in a good direction for our patients. All right. CARES update, our old business. CARES, as you'll remember, we started trying to talk about putting into place here. It's the cardiac arrest registry to enhance survival. We started trying to put in place here, oh, I don't know, Tim, what do you think, 7 years ago? Probably about 7 years ago. Well, we have our first agency enrolled. Now, we're waiting until the hospitals can actually finish their 4 data points per cardiac arrest, and they're slowly trying to figure out how to get this done. We're really close to actually being able to start collecting our model agency data and then move it out to other agencies. So look for more information on this in the future once Dr. DeMace and Dr. Bosco help me in their system, and I continue to bang my head against the wall in my system in order to actually get this data put in from a hospital outcomes perspective. We're getting close. We're getting close. The regional...
Chime in about the cards, because I did find out a little bit more information about CARES information. Because about almost a year ago, maybe put about $5,000 aside to budget and to continue to be part of the CARES thing since they went to the pay model. And we were trying to put together a program as a region, and we were going to try and roll it out as a vendor, one vendor at a time, to include our data. And so we selected Greene County because all but one of those agencies were on ESO, and that ESO data already flows to the CARES registry seamlessly, and it'd be a matter of just managing the data. And then, we would have to just desktop enter for one very small agency. And with that, the planning of that, we speculated on what is step 2, and we took another county, and we were trying to work on this. And so it comes to, the CARES data comes to a point where they have very stringent guidelines on how they will accept data and by which vendors they will accept data from. And so, for example, EMS Charts being the biggest vendor in the region, the vendor, EMS Charts is writing a plug to dump into there. However, being that the national data all goes to ImageTrend, why don't we just extract it all from ImageTrend? And so I had a really lengthy conversation with the people at CARES Registry and actually with the people at ImageTrend while I was out there at St. Paul at that conference. And it comes down to the CARES group is a small, very small knit group, and they are not comfortable accepting third-party vendor data into their system. And so where we were going to go through and do it vendor by vendor and eventually become the whole region involved with the CARES registry, and it really would have been a seamless thing if we could do that. The CARES people don't want to accept data in that fashion. So that is why there was a big pushback, and then they kind of dumped the county thing, and then they tried, we were trying a different thing. So the CARES registry data input is a very time-consuming and tedious thing because it has to almost be done every chart one at a time. And so I don't know. I know that it's going to slowly but surely progress, but it's going to probably be a much slower progression than we originally thought.
Thank you. Stroke grant update, we didn't get it. Dr. DeMace, Dr. McHugh, thank you for your partnership on this one. We'll continue to move forward. We are looking at a couple of other funding streams. This is actually to improve the endovascular interfacility transfer and repatriation for our stroke patients. I would like to point out that the interfacility transfer and repatriation is already going on and seems to be working relatively successfully. We've got to work better on door in, door out, accepting times, extrication times. That's something that the closer we watch, the more likely we are to improve it. So hopefully we'll be able to come up with some money from another pathway for that. And now I wanted to spend some time looking at the bylaws to correct some errors, which have been pointed out over time to us. And hopefully, everybody has taken a look at these when we sent them around electronically. If not, we have copies here. Yes, ma'am.
Can I just interject before you do the bylaws?
Yes, please.
Back in
Oh,
May,
thank you.
back in May, we had an executive session regarding a complaint about one provider against another provider. A tentative plan was put in place that was dependent upon an agency and an agency medical director. And for a variety of reasons, that plan fell through no fault of the provider in question. A secondary plan was put into place. It looks as if that will go through, and in talking with Dr. Daly, it looks as if that issue has been closed. The reason I bring that up here is part of the plan at the executive session was to bring an update to this committee at this meeting.
Deb, thank you. Any questions for Deb? Excellent. I was going to say, if you have a question, ask her later offline.
Ask me later.
Does everybody have access to the copy of the bylaws?
Can I get a copy?
Yeah.
Thank you.
Got it? You know all that, right? Matt, you got it? Sir, good? Good. Anybody else? Bob, you good? All right, I'm actually gonna go through, and I would suggest that we go through in terms of reading this. According to our bylaws, what we need to do is read the prospective changes into the record today, and then re-examine them and vote on them at the next meeting. All right? So just going through, these were the things that were brought to my attention already. And if there are any other things as we go through here that should be changed, Matt had brought up one other thing that needed to be corrected in here. And if anybody else has anything else, please let me know. Let's bring it in. First, voting members on the REMAC. We totaled them up to 13, and then recounted and discovered actually the number should have been 14. And then in the at-large physicians section, thought that would change. Voting members actually should be up to 18 total. All right, so as we go through, if anybody finds anything else we've got wrong, please let us know. I think we've got these marked out as well as possible.
Did we update the form number after that?
What?
Did we update the form number after that larger number?
Honestly, I would leave it where it is.
Okay.
But that's my perspective, just in terms of people that will make it to meetings, and so we have effective meetings. Sarah?
Under 2.1.1.1, does the chief medical officer of the hospitals know anything about this committee or who's on it? I'm just curious, can we put "or the emergency department medical director"? Because I have the feeling that the chief medical officer of the hospital knows nothing about this committee nor who's on it, or who should be on it.
There's a lot of truth to that, Sarah. What we did with CMO letters for the most recent request for nominations is we included a what we are and sent it to the CMO. In most cases, the CMO promptly turned around and handed it to the director of the emergency department and said, here, deal with this. That's okay, because if you started at the CMO, what it does is it engages the highest level of medical authority within that institution directly with what we're doing here. And I think having that level of engagement in the hospitals and hospital systems is important for what we can ultimately drive regionally. On the other hand, if anybody has a different idea and thinks we should streamline it a little bit, I'm
Are
certainly
there
happy
any
to.
CMOs that you did not hear back from, though?
I think, Tim, we got them all, ultimately.
Oh, really?
We had to tease a couple of them a couple times, but
We got them all, but I don't think we had an appointment from all.
yeah, they ultimately turfed it off to other people in
Do
most
we
cases.
put in like
but,
"or
yeah.
designee" language?
What?
Do we have to put in like "or designee" because when the signature comes with Dr. McDonough, it doesn't really qualify the CMO? designated by chief medical officer of the hospital or their designee.
I think it sounds pretty reasonable.
That covers
The
it
question there is
either
just
way.
how do you know who's a designee unless the CMO says so? So it doesn't really solve it. I mean, is there a regulatory reason it should be the CMO?
I don't think there is a regulatory reason just for purposes of engagement here were the reasons that we made it that in the first place
Can
in
you
our
just
original
put
discussions.
CMO and or emergency department medical director?
I think that gets confusing, but that's just me. Bruce?
I think it's important that we stay at the CMO level, and then you can pick where you say, or CMO's designee, but that way the CMO knows we exist, knows what we do.
Mhm.
In my particular group, I had to go and kind of clock them upside the head, but it gave me an opportunity to say, hey, there's this organization that runs EMS, this is what we do. And I went, really? And that's really important, and he just sort of, I wrote the email for him, and he forwarded it on. But that way they know we exist and what we do.
Yeah.
So I think that's important. And we can make it really easy for the CMOs by simply telling them what to say. They love one-line sentences.
I just think
Just hit reply all, say this.
judging as critical as some people are of the actual process, I don't want someone later on to be rejected because his letter doesn't come with the CMO's signature on it. So that's why they stick with that, means that way, as long as we get a letter from the hospital, it'll count. And no one can say, well, you don't have the CMO's letter.
Well, I think if the letter starts, if the question starts from us asking the CMO, and that's who the letter was addressed to that says you need a new representative, then the CMO may turf that off to somebody else,
As
but
long as
it's his or her
assuming
choice.
that filtering process.
Exactly, that filter has started. And if there's one where we have a question as to why, Dr. McDonough would have nominated Dr. McHugh for Ellis instead of somebody else, we can just go back to the CMO and ask if we have to. Reasonable? Leave it the way it is? Bruce, yes? Yes? All right. Matt had, nope, not yet, sorry. At-large physicians, changing that number from 4 to 8. Reason to change from 4 to 8 is we've already filled 4 slots, and we have a couple of more people that are interested in being at-large members, physician members of this body. The most important thing that we can do with this body is to maintain as much engagement for as many physicians as we possibly can. So getting those physicians here, keeping them engaged, making them feel integrated into the process, I think is profoundly important. And it's not like adding a couple extra at-large physicians costs us anything. So, thoughts?
The only thing you make, I mean, the way it looks like on this, it says 48.
That's because the 4 actually has a line through it. The line, however, is the same color as the 4 because it's a change. So you can't see if you look really carefully, you can see the center line on the 4 is really dark.
Another pair of glasses to do that, but that's what I have.
And you need to see it in the original red, sorry. I couldn't figure out how to make the slash go sideways, and I couldn't put an X over it, so. It should be 8 instead of 4. Maybe I should have crossed it out in the parentheses and then put it.
That's okay, we'll accept it. We're going to 8.
When you magnify this big, you still can't even tell.
So maybe, Tim, what we should do for next month is just put a little note next to it that says, not 48.
You just need a bigger meeting place.
Exactly. No change to non-voting members. Term of office for associate members, 2 years instead of 3 years and may be renewed, only for purposes of keeping membership at 2 years and then just renewing membership. So it's not associates are 3 years, somebody else is 2 years, somebody else is 5 years. It just got too confusing. Okay.
Do you want minor edits at this point too?
What?
Do you want minor edits at this point?
Yes, please.
as well? On 2.2.1.8, one representative from each county, EMS coordinator, EMS committee member, or EMS council member. Just putting the word member in there twice. After committee and council.
Thank you.
Mike, I don't have your copy, but, 6 counties, not 5?
Yes.
Or we're leaving one out, either way.
We'll rotate, every 2 years, we drop a county.
Howard, take a look. We don't have to change anything else based on that, right? There's no number of associate members that I'm missing?
I don't think so. I don't know, I talked to you about it, I don't know what you wanna do about paramedic training program. Technically, there's only one in Remo, and that's Hudson Valley.
Doesn't say anything about paramedic training program. That could actually open it up to every paramedic training program in the state.
2.2.1, one member from each paramedic training program, 2.
So one member from each paramedic training program local to Remo,
In proximity of?
in proximity of.
That we get paramedics from.
In
But that might
proximity
change
of.
because
Yeah.
E-Town is working on one, so right now it's 2, but it may turn to 3.
Okay. Um, 3.1, the chair shall be elected by, removing and from the voting members of REMAC. The chair should be elected from the voting and alternate physician members of the REMAC to allow an alternate member to have the opportunity to be chair as well. Sarah?
Just going back a step, the term of office for the associate members, can that automatically renew, or do you really want it to expire every 3 years? Should it automatically renew if there's no one else expressing interest?
The language they use for the hospital.
2.2.3.
No, I was going back to see what the language in 2.1.1 was.
Well, it's 2.1.1.1b.
Is there a Roman numeral on that? Should we use the same?
Instead of may be renewed, it shall be renewed automatically.
So, at this point, we have 2 commercial ambulance agencies, only one of whom is represented here. We currently don't have a career fire department representative at the table. We don't have a BLS service person represented at the table unless Chief Kroll is going to count today. Our pharmacist is not here.
But he can't count after today.
Right.
That's right. That's a good point.
Sorry, Steve.
Actually, at this point in the conversation. And our RTAC representative was here. So, do we see that there should be turnover in this every couple of years? Every couple of years sending out an email saying, would you like, probably makes sense. Renewing automatically would keep other fire department representatives, commercial ambulance representatives. I don't see that we're gonna have a whole lot of pharmacists banging down the door for, to come in. And I think Sean was coerced to coming in the first place. But goal is inclusion and opportunity for turnover. So do we make it automatically renew or not?
No.
That's the question.
Is everybody awake?
So, I mean, the idea was to renew if no one else is interested.
Well, what happens if, I'll play devil's advocate, what happens, and we see this a lot with state paperwork, they don't update their information or there's no involvement. Like all these colleges want to be included and stuff, but I can tell you that I've asked 3 times for them to send us updated contact information. So, say Travis is your BLS representative, just because he's an easy target. Okay, behind you. Travis shows up for one meeting, doesn't show up for the rest of them, is he still the representative? If he just shows up?
I think it's best left as an active process, and that way people have to renew their interest
Yeah.
if they wanna stay on.
And that's why I say that.
I think it's fine that way.
Okay.
There's no reason that it can't come out as like an advisory or anything else from Remo saying, hey, elections are up, these positions are available, it helps you market it. As you have turnover, you know, I'm embarrassed to say, I was in this job for almost 20 years before I had any idea what the REM score or anything like that. I worked in an agency, it run itself, I didn't have any problems, and then somebody said, hey, you wanna be on this? I got on, I was like, wow, there's a lot that gets done here. So there's a turnover in EMS in these agencies that if you market them in every couple of years and you say, hey, we're looking for people, and then if you don't get anything, then yeah, you just re-enroll the re-elect person for another term.
Everybody good?
Associate members held to the, attendance requirements as well?
As long as you
As long
have
as they have
a
cookies.
You've now met the new chair of the bylaws committee.
Is that in the bylaw?
Chair has to bring cookies.
No, but it wasn't
It was
motion
in
and
the minutes
approved.
from some meeting many years
It was.
ago.
Since they're non-voting, Sarah,
What's
do
that?
they need to be? Since they're non-voting, do they need to be held to the same requirements?
No, I'm just curious, because that would mean we would be aware if they weren't coming. If they were held to these attendance requirements and they weren't showing up, then we would know about it long before they were up for reelection, so.
Gotcha. And probably actually would be best if we do that, we can have an ongoing tally of attendance as part of our new attendance sheet update to that. That'd be a reasonable thing to do.
If they're not included, 4.1, so it just says members,
Yeah.
doesn't specify.
4.2 offers an exclusion just for ex officio members.
So, but only for ex officio. Yeah, that's reasonable, and they're already, good. Whew. Back to 3.1.1. Elected by the voting and alternate position members of the REMAC, good.
Yep.
Vice chair, 3.2.1, same language as chair. 4.0, attendance requirement, removing the
3.4.
inclusion of,
Mike,
what is
you
good?
skipped over 3.4.
Oh, sorry, 3.4, nominations may be accepted from the floor as long as the nominee is present and concurs. We will not be electing officers just because they went to the bathroom. That's not fair. Not a bad idea, but not fair.
Are we changing when the voting is occurring?
Voting currently says that it occurs
The last scheduled meeting of the year?
last scheduled meeting of the year.
And are we changing that?
Should we?
Well, that was
We
the
were
other
talking
comment.
about that.
So
He was
the,
talking about it.
the interesting question is, we can change it. We'd have to vote on it next month to change that. And then we'd have the elections the month after that, which is,
For this year, it would be the last meeting of the year.
and probably the last time, hopefully, these bylaws get open.
Right, and that, but then in the future, it would be this, second to last meeting of the year, or,
The idea being that there's some time for transition.
Mm-hmm.
I appreciate your point about this year, and I think we can easily just include that language, commencing in 2018, for example, whatever.
So how do you want to change the language?
Well, I think that's the question on the table, because if you wait till the very last meeting of the year, you're voting on new folks, they're moving into a position, but there's no overlap time to know who the, say, chair-elect is. Because you're out and you're in instantly, there's no chair-elect time to kind of learn the ropes, for example. It seems to me that overlap time.
So you're saying elect them in the fall and then still let them take office in
Exactly.
January?
Yeah.
There's like an intern
Mhm.
phase out.
So there's time for that chair-elect to kind of shadow and understand and spend 3 months figuring out how the heck they're supposed to do stuff.
So I also don't foresee many of the chairs jumping ship to Bermuda on December 31st either. So that will look fine, I don't know if we need to.
Well, I think the other thing is you're not talking about brand-new members that are going to step into the role as well, because you're talking about people who are already members of the committee.
All true, but if the
But-
chair is, for example, I don't mean you, Mike, sick or, you know, said, I'm just done and I'm retiring, I'm gone, and I don't wanna be here for the next
Mhm.
6 months, you know, then they're not around. But
Mhm.
if it's, the election's sooner, then you just know who it is sooner, that's all.
So maybe instead of, where should it be? Where is that, Matt?
3.4.
3.4.
So should the line, should actually the last scheduled meeting or as necessary and voted on by the body?
Say that again? That's kind of, that's all.
It doesn't sound right, but
How about two meetings prior to the expiration of the term? Now, you're not putting a date on it, you're
If
putting,
the expiration's end of year, say the vote in September, make it up, or heck, you can do it in, well, I say September, because you might not meet in August, for example.
No, we're in August, we meet in September, October, November.
Well, why don't, if you,
see, the thing is that when we talked about, when we wrote these, you know, Bruce, Matt, and Rob, we actually talked about the idea that the vice chair could actually be the incoming chair. And that way you would get that cycle and that continuity, right? But we ended up saying no, because the more likely situation was going to be that you were gonna have somebody that was gonna be able to serve in that role. Everybody else would step backwards instead of forwards. And there probably wouldn't be an interest in having that cycling chair. I think the cycling chair, like they do with New York State ASAP, works really well, because that way you get, you know, in New York State ASAP, it's president and president-elect. The president-elect gets the opportunity really to learn all the business.
It's kind of the same idea. I don't think you gain anything by waiting till the very end of the year to decide who's taking over.
Mm-hmm.
What if you did like nominations September, elections October, and then take the chair as of the first of the year? And that would still give you that grace period, if you will,
3 months.
you know?
Mm-hmm.
At least that way you'd have a month to know
Mm-hmm.
who was up, who you were voting, you know, that kind of stuff.
Mm-hmm.
But you can submit nominations electronically
Well, yeah, but
all year long. I mean, you don't really need to have a meeting in September to submit nominations.
Mm-hmm.
or make that the cutoff by
Say, hey,
September.
by September first, you put this, you have to have your nominations in, and at the first meeting of September, you vote.
Well, the current cutoff is by the start of the last meeting, it looks like, right?
Right.
Prior to the commencement of the last meeting of the year. So, but then it says nominations will be accepted from the floor, so really it's up to the vote
Right.
is the deadline.
I mean, remember, the goal behind all of this was to keep things as functional and integrative as possible. Right, not to make anything that's too bureaucratic that it's going to preclude somebody from inclusion.
Yeah, and I don't think that does this. I mean, look, it's not like you're springing it on anybody. You say, we're gonna vote on it in September,
Mhm.
and it's a 2-year cycle.
Mhm.
Kind of know that 2 years ahead of time when the votes happen, right?
Mhm.
So my point really is just, it makes sense to have an overlap period where you have the chair-elect. And it seems to me that, you know, from sometime around September-ish through the end of the year is probably appropriate amount of time.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, heck, you could do it a full year ahead of time, right? And have a year of chair-elect time. You could. But I think 3 months is plenty.
And it's really gonna be 4 because there's no meeting until February.
Fair enough. Well, they could take over January first anyway, but whatever.
Sam?
My personal opinion is, since the nominations are coming from the body that's already functioning together, I don't think it's as big an issue as if it were a person that's from outside our working committee. But be that as it may, if people really feel that there should be overlapping time, I would just make it read that the elections will take place the second of last meeting of the year, thereby giving the opportunity that if we change our schedule for some reason and have a meeting in November instead of October or whatever, or there's no meeting in October, then it would be September. You know, we're not having the election in December, we're gonna have it, the meeting immediately before December. So that's what, if the committee really wants that overlap, that's the way I would word it. Second of last meeting of the year to have the election.
Or on or prior to a certain date.
Let me know.
Well, that's why I didn't wanna get into the date, because then it sort of,
We don't know what the date is.
yeah, it binds you. Whereas if you just say the second of last meeting of the year, you know it's gotta be before the December meeting, whether it's in September, October, or November.
So Sam, should it actually say elections will be held prior to the last scheduled meeting?
Yeah,
Because that way, it depends and the body can make a decision as to when those elections are gonna take place?
I think that's okay. Yeah, it gives you, the committee, maximum flexibility that way, actually.
Because we're on even months this year, maybe we wanna go to odd months next
Yeah,
year.
that's my point. It gives you flexibility, because if you say, if you put certain dates in there, it's gonna,
Well,
handcuff
if
you.
we go with the elections to be set for November, we can pass through right now, because we're in November.
right, exactly.
So, maybe the other question is whether or not forget I even spoke. 3.4 right now reads, nominations for the officer positions must be received prior to the commencement of the last meeting of the year. That needs to go.
No, that's consistent with.
Well, no, because it continues to, in which the office term expires and elections held prior to the last scheduled meeting. You can't nominate after the elections.
You nominate the meeting prior to the elections.
Actually, maybe it just needs to say elections. Elections will be held prior to the last scheduled meeting of the year. Nominations may be accepted from the floor as long as the nominee is present and concurs.
Yeah.
Yeah, that takes care of it.
Maybe accepted electronically or from the floor, so somebody can send in, Rob's going to Antarctica for a couple of days, won't make the meeting, he can send his application in, say, hey Tim, I want to be chair.
But if I don't send in, you can't nominate me.
We can't nominate you while you're in Antarctica.
Unless you do it by.
All electronic submissions are suspects.
All right. Attendance requirement, 4.1. The problem with this section was that we were telling the regional council how they had to conduct business. We can't really do that. So instead, the REMAC membership can vote to throw its own members out, which is not an unreasonable thing to do. We do have to have the REMAC members approved by the council, that's in statute. But in terms of making sure that those, the REMAC can control its own membership, we can expel somebody if they don't fulfill whatever duties by 2/3 vote. Seem reasonable? 5.0, 5.1, collaborative discussion and debate are the keys to maintaining the strength of the system. Therefore, to the extent practicable and in compliance with public officers law, open meetings law, the REMAC shall conduct its business law. Okay? Just simple language for clarification. And there should be no fewer than 5 meetings per calendar year, not 6, because we actually didn't schedule 6. So we shouldn't hold ourselves to what we're not doing. A correction under 5.4.3, taking the NYS in front of open meetings law out, to make sure it's appropriate to the way we address the same thing in 5.1. And then in 5.4.4, all voting and alternate physician members may attend executive sessions. So we can make sure that all present physicians can become involved in an executive session as necessary, as well as anybody else that the chair selects. Okay?
Dr. Daly? We do
Yes,
have
sir.
We do have 6 meetings scheduled per year. There's February, April, June, and then we double up September, October, and then December.
November, December.
So there's 6. Cause we do September, October back to back, cause we do the summer.
Right, that's the
catch-up
one we
thing.
stooched together.
You leave it as 5.
Who put that in?
Side?
Somebody wrote me a really nice email saying you really shouldn't have it say 6 when you only have 5 scheduled.
They probably are thinking of the counties.
Yeah, I think
That's exactly what it was. It was keeping it in compliance with that. You're absolutely right.
At least this year we had 6
Well,
scheduled.
but at the same time, Kenny, that's actually is probably good. There should be no fewer than 5. If we have 5, we're okay. If we have 6,
We have to
we're
cancel
better.
one or something.
that's fine.
Yeah.
So,
Do we get a bonus?
What?
Do we get bonus for every 6 meetings then?
You actually double
You
your
get an
salary
extra
for the
cookie.
6. Regional EMS Systems Director and CMAC rep. REMAC shall elect a physician, AKA Regional Medical Director, which we have referred to in other parts of this. And it was one thing that I just saw now was shall be elected from the voting and alternate physician members of the REMAC added to this as well. So we know who's coming.
Hey, Mike,
Yep.
did you adjust the quorum number on 5.4.2?
We touched base on that a minute ago, and I suggested no.
So keeping it at 6 even though you're increasing the number?
Yeah, if that's all right, Craig. Frankly, most of the time I suspect we'll have 7, 8 people. I'd rather if we didn't end up in a position where there's actually business that needs to conduct, then we can't. And since these are gonna be posted meeting schedules ahead of time, hopefully we'll be able to always have more. But I'd hate to see what happened at the CMAC ever happen with us, where, you know, one guy's gotta go catch a train, the next thing you know,
Judging
we're
by
gone.
past experience, we got about the same size of the group, and we still have times where we've been scrounging for people on the phone to make the quorum.
Right.
I think keeping it where it's at, because we're not really adding, we're just adding spaces for people that are already here.
That's the goal.
Yeah.
That's really
No,
the
I
goal.
see that, I just didn't know if you got into a dicey situation on a regulatory side, if you have less than 50% counting as a quorum.
I don't think so,
Okay.
because we
Don't think
weren't
there's anything
before.
that-
We were less than, when we had 13 members and only 6 as a quorum, we were already less than 50%.
Well, you're up to how many numbers? I mean, that's,
Hmm?
how many members are you up to total now?
18.
So you're at a third of the membership.
Mhm.
I don't know if you might wanna do a third plus 1, just to,
Only if there's a specific regulatory reason for it.
what's Robert's Rules of Order, does it address it?
It's a question best not asked, I
Yeah. Yeah, I think the quorum is what the body, the quorum traditionally is what the body sets as the quorum.
I would go with that answer, I like that answer.
Keeps it simple.
They're ultimately our bylaws. Are we okay with 6 of us representing all of them? If we're okay with that, then we're good.
If we start getting 3 or 4 lunatic positions, we might wanna reevaluate it, but I think.
As long as we stay with just the one, we're okay? Rich.
In 2.1, you can make note that the 13 was changed to 14 is now 18.
Yes.
Okay,
According to Robert's Rules, a quorum is the minimum number of voting members who must be present at a properly called meeting in order to conduct business in the name of the group. A quorum should consist of, and this is in quotes, as large as can be depended upon for being present at all meetings when the weather is not exceptionally bad.
There you go.
Keyboard's at.
Number one, we can count on the weather being bad, and number two, it says should.
I'm just saying, but I mean, there's a fallback.
There's New York State
But there's no
corporation-
fuzzy net.
There's New York State corporation law, and I don't wanna ask the question, because there might be something in there.
Don't ask the question.
And, I think keeping it vague, keeping it the way it is, Robert's rule specifically doesn't tell you it's gotta be a majority.
Right.
Right.
You know, so I would just leave it, unless we hear something different down the road.
And hopefully nobody will be researching this enough to find something different down the road.
Hey,
All right.
Yeah, that's right. Howard's right.
One question.
Howard just made a good point,
Uh-oh.
that the 18 doesn't really represent the voting membership.
It's
Right.
usually 50% of your voting membership.
Usually doesn't matter if Roberts is our guide, right?
No, I'm actually saying your
18 is
18
voting
isn't,
members.
is 18 voting?
18 voting.
We've got a couple,
18
Oh,
physicians.
because we expanded
At-large.
the
Yeah, that's
position.
Yeah.
right, because we
Okay.
expanded
That's
the
position.
associate membership, that's right. That's right.
Only question, the assistant medical director, that's the only term that is different than the other terms, I just don't know if that's something.
That was in compliance with the CMAC officer term,
Okay.
because it's the CMAC representative as well. And the last thing we need to do
Change that over.
is to change that ever, unless the state has a change, because the vetting process, if we were to make it 2 years, the vetting process would take most of the time that the person was actually in office.
Okay. That'll be fine.
So conduct of business,
oh, there you got Rich.
uh-oh.
Cheap seats, sorry. Your nominee does not require the regional council's approval. If you wish to include that in your bylaws, that's your business, but it is not required.
Which nominee?
Your nominee to the CMAC
Oh.
and your regional medical director does not require the approval of the REMSCO. Physicians seated on this body by statute require REMSCO approval, but not who you designate from among you to be your regional medical director, your CMAC rep. That's your business. If you want to run through the REMSCO, it's up to you, but I would strike it if it was me.
Oh. What do you think?
I'd say strike it.
One less
step?
hurdle.
Okay.
Wow, Sam is right, reading the business corporation law.
I'm so surprised.
Luckily, this is not an incorporated body. Uh-oh.
Don't read it out
There
loud.
are parameters about bylaws in New York State relative to nonprofits and stuff, and that's what I'm referring to, and I'm not asking the question, but obviously Mary's
Do not refer to Mary's phone.
looking.
Matt?
Can we assume these bylaws and the revisions will be run by some form of legal representative? Let's just leave it at that then, right?
Yeah.
They'll figure it out right after years.
So, I'll give you the formal red line copy, Tim, and let's formally send it to council. I think that's it.
So the other, well, Mike, on 7.1 there, 7.1 doesn't have the same language as the chair and vice.
Oh, we said that already.
So you did.
Sorry.
Missed that.
That was, the piece that you meant was the, shall be elected from the voting and alternate physician members of the REMAC, right?
That was my thinking. It wasn't
Yeah, I think that makes a ton of sense. Everybody agree with that? Yeah. Sarah?
Under 8.1, I think we should reword the members of the executive committee so it makes more sense. it will consist of the chair, comma, vice chair, comma, the chairs of the QA and academic committees. Because you have vice chair kind of stuck at the end, and it doesn't say the vice chair of what.
Huh.
So chair, vice chair, and the chairs of the QA and academic committees.
Actually, what's not in there too is, should the executive committee also comprise of EMS systems medical director?
That might be smart.
Should we have an 8.5 as the bylaws committee? And write into the committee that Dr. Vogel serve as chair of said committee? No? No, okay.
Take that as a hostile suggestion.
And we will not put the out of the room clause in there. Anything else you see?
On 2.2.1, associate members,
Yes.
The way it's listed is exclusive of an ALS, private or non-for-profit ambulance service. It excludes services like Clifton Park, Bruin, Rotterdam.
Unless they're at large, that's true. And the other question could be, do we need a representative from BLS service? This list is very specific. Rich, is this list in code?
No, no. The only thing is it's in law for the REMAC composition, the voting members have to be physicians, and you can have non-voting associate members, but there's no prescription, I don't believe, for it. I'll look right now, but
Did we mirror the CMAC membership with this? No, because there's no nurse on here.
your docs are supposed to be from various backgrounds. Give me 1 second, please.
I would actually suggest that, I think Dean makes a good suggestion. How did you want to word that?
One representative from an ALS service.
Mike, to your point, you want to take away the specificity of these things? Could you word it to just say, say, I don't know, make up a number, 6 members with an attempt to represent pharmacy, ALS, whatever?
Let me give you a statutory site. It's 3000D in definitions. Oh, no, I'm sorry. Start by being right. Hold on a second. 3001 in definitions, and then it's in subparagraph 16. Regional Emergency Medical Advisory Committees means a group of 5 or more physicians in one
That's
or
where
more
6 comes from. Sorry, go on.
I'm sorry?
That's where the 6 comes from.
Regional Medical Advisory Committee means a group of 5 or more physicians and 1 or more non-voting individuals representing each of the following: hospitals, basic life support providers, advanced life support providers, and emergency medical service training sponsors, medical directors approved by the affected Regional Emergency Medical Service Council. That's the definition of a REMAC, and that's from the law.
Okay. So we're in compliance.
You're
We're
in compliance.
well in compliance. And if we want to continue to name these, I think the idea of one representative from, what were you suggesting, ALS not-for-profit?
Well, you have one representative from a BLS service, you have one commercial ambulance representative. Either you need to take out BLS or you need to take out the word commercial. To include agencies like Clifton Park, Bruin, Rotterdam, and the others, Boston Lake, I can go on and on.
You could simply add one not-for-profit ambulance service. Would that work?
Yeah.
I wouldn't gain anything by being so.
No, because we need the BLS representative that you just quoted,
I'm
right?
sorry?
You just said BLS ambulance.
That's only voting. This is
Basic life
non-voting.
support providers, yeah.
Yes, we need one of them.
You need, yeah, you need somebody.
What's six is fine.
So that's good, we should.
So can you add one representative from
Why
a
don't you just take it all
not-for-profit ALS?
Mary was nice enough to look up what we were concerned about with New York corporation law, but what it basically says is a quorum is not less than 1/3 of the votes of the shares entitled to vote.
We're right there.
All right. So that's answered.
We don't have to worry about it now.
As long, at the 18, the 6 works.
Right.
Good job there.
The issue is, we just need commercial and ALS and BLS. That'll cover everything, we have no holes.
I'm sorry, could you say that again?
To identify the hole that you identified, if we just add commercial, ALS and BLS, we're set, right?
Yeah.
So what
Commercial,
What happens when you get 2 ALS providers and 1 of the associate members?
One can be an at-large member, the other one can wait till the seat comes up next time.
Or you just take the whole thing, be less prescriptive with it, say 5 or 6 of these, and then just quote the law, saying that's what you're looking to represent.
So if you didn't have a BLS, you could have 2 ALS, based
You
under
don't-
that kind
you don't
of
have to be that
broad
prescriptive.
does the
description.
commercial ambulance service have to be commercial? Can it just be one ALS ambulance service and one representative from a BLS ambulance service?
I don't really mind.
Leave it to my colleagues. I don't have a problem adding a representative from an ALS ambulance service on here. I think that's absolutely fine. I think it's fine if we, narrow it down a little bit. I think we already have nominations for some of these seats to join us here. I think basically if we look around the room and figure out what everybody already is representing, we've probably come up with something that's close to this anyway. The only other one that I wanted to add in here was that the chair of the nurses committee should actually be named as a seat, as an associate member here. Just to include their participation, because it's so valuable.
Or a representative from the nurses committee.
Mhm. ALS service? Show of hands quickly. Yes. Removing all these designations and just putting the line. Okay. Any other things that we should take a look at while we're here?
6.1, update your date.
6.1. No, because we already voted on February 16th, 2016, that these took place. We did that. Now we're amending based on
And then you're just
the,
gonna record the amendments.
based on 6.2. Anything else?
So you're gonna send out another.
I'm gonna send out the updated red line.
Before the next meeting?
Yes.
Yeah.
And I'm gonna do that as soon as I possibly can, so I don't lose my chicken scratch on here.
Motion to adjourn.
Dr. Bosco, that is an excellent idea. Do I have a second? Dr. Joy now just expended all the energy he had left.
Brian, don't run away.
Did you guys ever figure out the transmitting issue with the Zoll?
I called your cell phone. I was going straight to voicemail. Did you get a new cell phone?
Straight to voicemail.
Well, Gavin is, they just got this bridge to it. Because the thing is, the light now, the service, Daily got Lightnet to give the bridge to Gavin. I haven't. It's something software or device that lets these roles transmit to the internet.
Voice, not through to this. Google Voice is supposed to transmit straight to that.
Because we had never, Gavin has never been able to.
And I'll be honest with you, I don't know one of the main software, Gavin, up there, they're not able to change.
Because I talked to, their director, and he said, you know, if any problem with the
Yeah, I don't know about the director. He seems to be
I never, I was supposed to be even trying to get someone to buy that $1,000.
This doesn't have.
So they can do it because they never
Here.
because they've never been able to do it. So I'll see if it's working. Yeah, well, that was it. Used to be $1,000. Right. The only one in town doing this in the country.
Can you talk to Trinity?
Wilton just goes to one small.
I pushed on door.
They're not giving us less than us.
But they have the role, they have.
Yeah, but I think each service for each hospital.
Right, that was the problem with the initial thing, is everybody was piggybacking on, well, really, we didn't even know about it. And then
Usually
they
not
came to our own.
Usually they're a little more.
Back up here. Yeah, I know.
Relevant.
Well, I was trying to help, but you know, there's probably a little people just want to do something. He kind of does that.
We have all these places, but there's always like 6 or 8 docs who always know here, but don't respond about it. Like comes more half hours members.
It's just a little more cumbersome than stuff like this. I mean, they're high-end, so high-end. Yeah, they're a little more temperamental. The problem is, first of all, I'm not. You've got some medics that are slow on the uptake. You got slow neurons. It takes them a little bit extra time to learn it. So you got the learning curve and things. I mean, it's meant for superior patient care. It's not like.
Would you do that?
I can go on and on.
Interoperability. All my medics are, all our medics are being used to.
We got one.
Especially for one who's on 6:30.
We have a real good handle. And the dumber medics use the flex pack 50, the smarter medics use the lying. Hey,
I know.
I didn't name names, I'm just telling you. Dumb ones, life pack, smart ones don't. It's an amazing analogy. We should do a study on it. EMS agencies throughout the nation and just look at which monitor they gravitate
Yes, that would be bad for everybody.
Yeah, exactly.
Gotcha.
Yeah. who basically puts a call and exchange of order for milligram material. And then later came up to me and said, why would they call here if they're going to on there?
I'm not sure.
So it did. We already listened to all of that. And he says, now there's that program.
But they didn't give 2 per kilo, they gave 1 per kilo.
Well, they asked me to, but.
This kid was freaking huge.
Was
The message that came through to me when the doc came over to me is, why the hell did they, A, why the hell they call it St. Pete's, and where are we going to take the patient? And B, they haven't been doing giving 100 milligrams of ketamine to this kid for pain management. And I said, that doesn't make any sense. Well, when I went to the chart, I looked at the chart, it's like, oh, they were trying to straighten this thing out. And you look at the images, holy shit, this guy's tibial plateau is exploding. You know, that's terrible. You know? Well, we're operating because obviously the patient is completely off of but I didn't know that makes sense. What was written down made sense. What was said at time of turn.
Hazmat and IO for Clifton Park.
Yeah, that's what we kind of figured. So we said that. Corey was the one who ordered it.
Did Corey write it in?
Yeah.
He did.
Where would I buy it? That explains it.
I would just probably.
Yeah.
Let me talk to the respiratory guys.
We all know where they got that contact. So Corey knows that.
Yeah.
It was a ketamine order, which is very, very good.
All things being equal, and we face this, right, there's some concern that maybe you can reach out directly to your medical director for an order, right, that's been raised as an issue. I want my guys calling me for orders for goofy shit. I want you guys calling up your guys, right? And that makes sense. I didn't know you were working days. Now I understand why they called looking for you. It just makes sense.
What happened, he was just a little bit outspoken. Whoever that
Jenna knew it was a patient caretaker.
So they basically put me in a
service, please, because that means a slap down to me. Yeah, next time you hear about something, call me immediately. That can't happen. No, a physician should be able to say,
Even at that,
you can say,
we do it behind closed doors.
yeah, exactly. No, exactly. It's absolutely insane.
Well, I'll try to get a name or description or something.
Yeah, please. Please.
But we spoke with Corey, and we all know the right way.
I would have read the chart, I was like, oh, that makes sense. My text to Dr. Ashley, I texted Shelley, I said, Shelley, they gave that for procedural sedation to straighten that thing out. The answer was, oh, that makes sense.
So that was the reason that I didn't call. You know, they probably should just run right to my cell phone.
Money for the BLS component is hard.
Subject to our agreements. But then it's also,
Money for ALS.
it just.
All things being equal,
Just happened.
right? With the laryngoscope in one hand, tube in the other, someone holding your cell phone to your ear, it gets complicated to get it out for a while. But the other thing that didn't happen, that should have happened, is a complex order like that, given by a doc at St. Peter's, the doc at St. Peter's has to call and talk to the person on the other side.
Because I do that if I can get another call.
Right. That's not even a should. That's an absolute. That's an absolute.
Because I've done that in the past when you guys probably have that reason for people calling. Right here, you only have one.
Exactly. Call his cell, call my cell. Just get it on.
Yeah, no, I switched to, there's actually so it's sort of, I was interested, but I really wasn't ready. There's one members groups and one Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. Part-time. What's your, I don't have so I don't know exactly what it is. So I talked to Frank goes, well, you know,
So
he's
then
gonna work 12
if
shifts.
for some reason all the
Six.
PCRs are done under you,
You can put me on Monday, Tuesday, because those are the only days I can work with all the stuff like this. You know, I must admit, it's from a standpoint of functional ED, it's like, all my x-rays are red, I'm a consultant, they actually are down, that's agreement to have a big deal. So that's expensive, but my sleep cycle is so screwed up, I'm still exhausted most of the time. Sooner or
like I said, I asked the question because our officers are smaller, that's why I asked them. You know, because geographically, this fits inside of here.
Oh, from your, yeah, from this, maybe a dog. And right now I'm driving my wife nuts because I used to, our current marriage, I've been gone 3 nights a week. She had all that free time to do whatever she wanted. Now I'm plugging her every night. Yeah, exactly. So basically, we're firefighters. And poor dog, the dog was so used to, you know, it would wake up in the room. Well, I would wake up in the morning and, you know, sleep with my wife during the night, wake up in the morning, we'd go for a walk, and then we'd go to sleep with it. And now it's like, what happened? There's nobody during the day. Take it off. Let's see.
No, I was just gonna, I got hold of Nick for a call. She was fine, she's fully with it. Signed just tomorrow.
That's the way to get around having to apply
Adult
for one.
services was fine, crisis was fine, so everybody kind of signed off and got out of there.
Good. Alright, well, I'll talk to you soon. It sounds like this is all working.
I sent you some notes from the first meeting. Incorporate into that, and then we need to come up with how we.
Those are my favorite things. Niagara and okay, there's another disc that's getting mailed out yesterday.
Yeah, I mean, I think people are very nervous.
Yeah, but just so you know.
Is
it still the summer?
You know what, that coffee, I
suspect it's going to be.
Did you drink the coffee in there? I think so.
Last time I talked to him about a bunch of IPMC stuff. So I
but I mean, especially with the school season coming up, the stuff is going to work out.
So my first little goal, and she's actually friendly, but sort of there's something, I know, it's not really around. They're the people who said they're asking for something.
This is your professional volunteer?
Well, yeah, but this still needs to stack the work.
Did they ever fix your ambulance, by the way? The one that was in a Ford forever?
Yeah.
Because you could look out our window and see it.
Right, yes, that's a lot. I was there for a while.
There was one,
We got another one.
whose equipment in there is using, you know?
But we were laughing because we told Dana he could not go look for another service center.
Yeah.
Mary, thank you, sir.
Yeah.
That's gonna be.
Well, I know, I do a little organization, I go I bring some stuff in here, stuff in there. I bring dead Fred out.
I can sit down with my volunteers and say, so, you know, when you write the question, in order to be, then write that, what they use last line. I don't know, and then, these are linked really,
The problem is they use that place as a social media, they're only entitled for that social media. Yeah. They've had it.
Will that trigger, or did you not?
You're not gonna do it again?
You're taking away their.
So you didn't change your mind?
But that's what I'm saying. You know, honestly,
There are people here who should be chairing it instead, you know, maybe what we've come up with some kind of a cycle and we'll rotate.
certified providers.
Right? But some of it's because he's going in another direction and he's not really heard it all. Yeah, considering it is sort of
Yeah, that's predictable. Yeah.
aside from me to not sit there, it's somebody sitting there.
30, 73.
Goes off at 53. Same time.
Oh, I don't
My next meeting. Well, happy not to. With the open UAD, I took down screen.
Like I said, I was just making sure that all those little nuances.
And it was.
I'd rather you help us.
But anyway, it's still meeting with them, but whatever.
But Joe doesn't also understand a lot of the geography.
Here's how you
Like Joe was good
here's the PIX
in
history.
the southern section of Vermont,
Tell
because he
me
knows the
your
hills.
email for your chief, not his name, I
You
want
know?
the chief at your organization. That sort of stuff. You know, the real nuts and bolts, that's the stuff I want. But of course, people behind the scenes will talk about the grand scheme of healthcare in Troy and Horry. That isn't what the EMS provider really wants to hear. They wanna know, well, it will be, where do I drop off my PCRs?
I didn't do it. Who do you need for $5?
I'm talking with Sean already. Sean's gonna get it. Because what happens is they change people every year. And we don't know who to contact. You know, and the only reason we know is their director of ops just sent us some paperwork, hey, we're back in service. It's like, that's nice, who are you? You know, so we just like to update it, so I called Sean up, Sean McGuire, their advisor. And said,
Either Sean or me.
yeah, and I usually just go through Sean, just to get
Those guys will help us together. I hope there's someone that wants to follow in our footsteps.
The people
all right.
And
of the plan, the plan manager,
And I,
Oh, no.
I've gotten better, I've gotten much better about this. Yeah.
other high places.
I was correct. That little section, no, I think that little section in Bethlehem, they need to have like a service area because that's not some Bethlehem's ops.
You know, we work, the guys
Whoever
online, you
owned
know?
their.
Don't want Bethlehem's ops cert.
I guess, understanding or.
You have Delmar, Ellesmere, Slingerlands, and Selkirk fire districts. Your ops cert is defined by fire districts. You don't have North Bethlehem, or whatever that other weird name is they sometimes don't. Yeah, I talked to Brian. Yeah. Yep, Brian understood completely. Yep.
have a plan.
Yeah, they're gonna do a service agreement to cover it.
No, but he
Piece
had a company.
for the ALS component, because otherwise you have an ALS ambulance billing.